Today we're going to talk about the things you never want to do to your lawn. Alright, now these are very simple things we're going to talk about, but just want to make sure that none of these are being done. This can make a big difference in your lawn, for the good or for the bad. So stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. This is Mike with Jealous Lawn Care, and today we're going to talk about all the things that you want to make sure you are not doing to your lawn, because you could be damaging the root system, you could be allowing infestation, you could even be making more work for yourself and not even know it. So let's go through these, and I think there's about 6 that we're going to go through, but as I'm talking maybe I'll add another 1 or 2. Alright, so the first thing you never want to do is you never ever want to mow when your grass is wet. Alright, so this includes rain overnight or just before you're mowing, and it also includes that morning dew. So pretty much every morning, if you're first waking up bright and early, probably before 7 or 8 o'clock, the grass is going to have that dew on it and that condensation overnight. So you want to make sure you don't want to mow that early, because yes, that still counts as wetness, moisture in the grass, and you don't want moisture while you're cutting. So when you're cutting your lawnmower is not designed to cut wet grass or anything wet. It's like cutting, a wet noodle versus a dry noodle. Which one's going to cut easier? Obviously the dry one. So obviously we want a nice clean cut, and what I'm talking about is, if you can see the end of this grass, see that there's no browning or anything like that. If you mow wet, you won't have that most likely. So the first problem with mowing wet is the fact that it's going to be clumping all up under the mower deck, and you don't want that. That's going to not give you a good mulching factor, we'll say. So it's not going to cut up those blades of grass as well as it should, and that's definitely going to cause a problem, because it's going to create too much thatch, and instead of little pieces of grass, it's going to be larger pieces of grass because it didn't get chopped up properly or as many times. So when your mower cuts up the grass, it doesn't just cut it up once and chop off a layer. It cuts it, and then, that's why they have mulching blades. That's what they do, is they mulch and mulch and mulch. So it cuts it, I don't know, let's just say 2, 3, 4 times, depending on what kind of blade that you have. So the second reason why you don't want to mow when it's wet is because of the fact that when you're mowing wet, all that grass is clumping up on your wheels, it's sticking to it, it's sticking to underneath the deck. And when it comes off a lot of time on the sidewalk. So you don't want it to come off on the sidewalk. And I have a link below and showing you guys an example of when I did have to mow wet, because I got caught halfway through doing my front yard, and I was trying to beat the rain, and surprise, surprise, life happens, and it rained right on me as I was in the middle of my lawn. So I'll show you guys what that looks like below. It stained it after one time. I mean, I literally power washed the weekend, and then the next day I was out there mowing the grass and got stained immediately. So this is an immediate staining. So make sure you don't mow when the grass is wet. It will stain your concrete, your driveway, your walkways. And the third reason is probably the most important reason why you don't want to mow when it's wet. Reason being is because of the fact that, like we talked about before, you won't get a clean cut, and when you have that ripping factor, it's going to open up the ground or the grass for infestation and disease problems. So that's number one way you can get disease problems, by mowing wet, because you're mowing it wet and you have that humidity and also that other problems in the air, which just is not good for the grass. So the question is, how do you mow wet when you need to? Because sometimes you may be caught in the rain like I was. So the instance I was in was I was halfway done with my lawn, and the other half I was in process of mowing, and it just started. I mean, it didn't start with a drizzle, it started with a downpour, and here I was looking stupid in front of everybody and all my neighbors that drove by at the time. But basically I was in the middle of mowing, and then it just downpoured on me, and then I had to choose. Do I leave half my lawn unmowed and look stupid until it stops raining, until the grass actually dries out? So that looks really stupid for a long period of time. Or do I just look stupid and mow wet right at that one time? And it was pouring, and I did another 20 minutes for my front yard. I left the back for the next day because the front, like I said, I was in the middle of it, so it was half done. So what you have to do then is, if you are caught in the rain like I was, or if you really have to mow when it's wet because it's going to be raining the next several days and you haven't got around to it. I mean, life happens. We all got stuff that comes up. So what I recommend doing is raising the mower blade up, so maybe a notch or 2 notches higher than usual. So basically, if you raise the mower blade up, then you're not cutting as much as usual, and therefore the mulching doesn't have to do as much job. All right, and you won't have as much clumping as a result. So one more thing that will also help is if you raise the mower blade up, and then at the same time you're also taking less of a chunk at the grass, meaning you're not doing as wide stripes or as wide cuts if you're not doing stripes. If you're striping in the rain, it's not going to look good already, to be honest, because water and stripes don't work good together. It's the quickest way to make it fade, because it makes all that grass stand straight up again. So, but that's a separate video on itself. So make sure you overlap more than usual on your cuttings and your passes. All right, that will again take off less of a bite each time, just like raising the mower deck up. So second thing we never want to do is never water at night. Watering is great, but again, just like all lawn care, timing is key for everything. Whether it be when to fertilize, when not to fertilize, when to aerate, when to put down pre-emergence. So some people want to water every day, and that's fine. The only problem with watering every day is you won't get as deep of a root system, versus if you watered, let's say, every 2 days or every 3 days would be even better. So I'd recommend like every 3 days, especially in drought periods. And you want to water roughly, you know, they say an inch of water every week, but, you know, unless you're pulling out a rain gauge or a little, you know, can of, you know, whatever, you could just put anything down if you want to measure that inch to see how much your sprinklers are, but you don't have to get that technical about it. Just water pretty deep. I mean, you can tell when the ground is too squishy, or if it's, you know, browning up, then you don't have enough. So you just modify accordingly. Or if you don't want to go out there and get a rain gauge, not a problem. You can figure it out pretty quickly by a few waterings. So best way to encourage deep root system, to water every 3 days, so maybe twice a week. All right, and you can still get that inch or whatever you feel is needed for that time frame, inch and a half, depends on, you know, time of the year, heat conditions, how much it's raining on its own. So there's a lot of factors at that, but main thing, you never want to water overnight. You know, I see a lot of these, you know, irrigation systems that are built in, and they have it on these timers that go off in the morning and in the afternoon, and then also at night after the sun's already down. I mean, that's the worst thing you can do. Excuse me. That's the second worst thing you can do to create fungus control problems when you water at night, because basically you're creating, it's already kind of humid, or say in the air with the hot summer weather and stuff like that. So you don't want to water when there's no sun. The grass can't basically take up that and use that water and nitrogen. So don't water at night, all right? Only water during the daytime when the sun's out, all right? And yes, there is some loss to evaporation. We can go on and on about evaporation, and, you know, should you get a drip irrigation system for your whole lawn, and we can go on and on for hours about that, but best thing is to avoid your disease problems of your lawn. Disease problems are not the easiest thing to go away. I have videos on that, which some of you have probably checked out already, but it's not an easy get rid of in one application usually. So by the time you usually notice it, it's already too late. Maybe you didn't put down your pre-emergent. You know, sometimes yes, sometimes no. So best thing to do is just avoid that, all right? Don't water at night. Next thing that will also contribute to a lot of problems you never want to do is you never want to mow with a dull blade. Very simple. This should all be very simple steps. None of these are expensive. Technically, I think these are all probably free. I'm not even talking about extra steps yet to get into as far as spending more money, doing this, doing that. These are all basic steps of things not to do to your lawn, or ways that could be hurting your lawn. You don't even know about it. So number 3, you never want to cut with a dull blade. You always want to make sure that you're getting clean cuts. You don't want any of that ripping factor like I was trying to show you earlier. Unfortunately, I don't have any ripping in my grass, but you see how these are green all the way to the top of the blade? That's what you want. You don't want any brownness from, let's say, here up or here up, you know. And also, if it was a dull blade, you would also see this grass blade ripping on the top. It could be brown usually from here up. Usually that top section will be brown. That's a sign. And then another sign would be the fact that it's ripping several of the blades of grass. And that's what creates a lot of browning on top. So when people often have the question, hey, you know, I don't like mowing my grass because every time I mow it, it gets brown. But when I leave it longer, it's still green. But the second I cut it, it's brown. Hey, that's pretty simple, I think, right? Check your blade, because when you cut it, it's all brown on top. Think about it, a billion blades of grass that are all brown on top, it's going to look a lot browner. So make sure that you don't have any imperfections in your blade. Sharpen it. I like to sharpen my mower blade once a month. If not, you know, do it whenever you can, all right? Lots of things will damage your mower blade. It's not just going to be rocks. It could be, you know, tiny little wood chips. Could be pine cones. I got issues with pine cones in the back because I have like 5 pine trees. So there's lots of factors that could be hitting the blades that shouldn't. And another thing I do want to piggyback on the fact of this sharpening your blade, I want to incorporate with mower maintenance, is make sure that you clean your carburetor. Cleaning your carburetor out, it's a very simple job. All you need is basically some carb cleaner, and it's a very simple job. All you do is unscrew it. I'm not even going to go through the whole thing here. I got a little video right here on the full mower maintenance. So the worst thing that you can happen is, let's say you don't have a lot of time. You know, a lot of times when you're mowing a lawn, you don't have a lot of time, and you're trying to get it done quick. You know, we all have life, so that's just one of the factors. Unfortunately, we can't really enjoy our mowing as much as we want to, right? But hopefully we're enjoying it as much as possible. So if you haven't checked out how to clean your carburetors, check down the link below. So how do you know if your carburetor needs to be cleaned? A couple ways I can think of would be is if you start it up and then it starts up and then maybe runs rough for a while before it maybe, or maybe it doesn't even get back to normal. It just always runs a little rough. It's not as loud as normal, or it's not as powerful. That would be one symptom. And the second symptom would be is if you start it up and you just can't start it. So that could be an instance of you need your carburetor cleaned. And you could take it to a place and they'll charge you, I don't know, 50 bucks or something like that, but that's a lot. Then you have mower downtime and you can't cut, you know, so there's a lot of factors. And it's also, doing this method, cleaning your own, is free, essentially. I mean, sure, they'll do a better job because they'll take the whole thing physically apart, hopefully, but all you 99% of the time would need to do is do this one section, just cleaning out that housing of the carburetor that it sits in, because basically it gets all clogged up. So like I said before, I got a video down below. I don't want to get too much into that. I like getting into tangents, but that's another video on itself. So next thing you want to make sure that you are not doing, you're cutting an overgrown grass. And you're trying to do it, and you're like, oh, okay, I'll just cut it, let it grow a little bit, and then I'll cut it. But the problem with that is that you're going to be ripping your blades if your grass gets too tall. So I see this happen a lot to good lawns, bad lawns, whatever, but it's very bad. You don't want to get into a habit of doing this. It's always steer clear of this. You see lawns that are way overgrown and then they try and cut it with one pass, and a lot of times they're probably not even raising the deck up. You know, they probably want to cut at the same level, and then they leave all these mulch clipping piles left over on the sides, like right along their mower wheels. So that's a sign that you're mowing when it's too tall. So either raise that deck really high so you're not getting those clumping on the side, or better yet, mow on a regular basis. So if you have that and you have to mow, make sure you raise it up to the highest setting it goes, mow it, then drop your setting down to your normal setting, then mow it again. It's very important that you don't cut off more than 1/3 of the blade of grass, and that's a very common thing you'll find everywhere online. You never want to cut the blades of grass more than 1/3. Alright, so very important. Stick with it, because if you don't, then again you're going to have the same problem you do when it's wet. You're going to be ripping that blade of grass. You know, you have more grass that the lawnmower is trying to mulch up when it just can't. It's only meant to mulch up a certain amount. And some mowers might be better than others, so you guys can be the judge of that on your own lawn, but in general, make sure you don't take off more than 1/3. You know, you don't want any ripping. If you have ripping at the grass, investigate. Figure out why. Figure out if it's your lawnmower. Maybe your lawnmower is underpowered. Most of the time, it's probably just going to be either it's overgrown, grass or the fact that your mower blade is dull. So make sure that you investigate that. So next thing you want to make sure that you're doing is you want to make sure that you mow consistently and at a long height. Make sure that you're not cutting too short for your grass type. So there's a lot of places online, a lot of resources where you can look at that'll give you your grass type and then the recommended mower setting or the height. There's a pretty big range on those though, unfortunately. So whatever that range is, set it to the top. Set it to the highest range. Like I have Kentucky bluegrass, I'm mowing consistently 3.5 inches over the summertime. You know, it's great thing to do. Always mow tall. There's a lot of issues that you can get away with if you have a taller grass and a thicker grass than if you have very short grass. It opens up a lot more issues which you don't even want to get into here. And one other thing I'll also piggyback onto this, which is mowing at a tall height and also consistently, is the more often that you mow, the better. Pretty much to a point. I mean, mowing twice a week in the spring, I say that's basically an essential thing to do. You don't want to mow once a week. When it's growing like that, you have first of all, you have all that nitrogen from the rain, you have all the nitrogen and phosphorus, potassium. You got all those good nutrients that are making the grass grow up and also grow in the roots. Hopefully you're getting all those steps covered with maybe your soil sample. So it never hurts to cut your grass too often. You can cut it every day if you really wanted to. Basically, the thought behind it is the more often you cut, the faster it'll grow up, meaning the grass up, and also from the roots down. It encourages root growth and we'll call it top growth. So, great thing to do. If you got time, cut it as often as you want, all right? And you always have these nice, bright stripes. And the last thing I do want to mention real quick is be careful with your fertilizing, because you can see an example here of fertilizer burn. And the sad thing is, these people have a lawn care company, so I don't know if the lawn care company did that or if they tried fertilizing and get more competitive with me on their own. So you can see it along here. See how burnt that is? And you can see another sign of it right there and over there. And you can totally tell that this is fertilizer burn. Reason being because it goes along the same path as their lawnmower. I mean, they're doing the same lawnmower and they're fertilizing at the same spots. So you can see the same path. You can see it along there. I mean, it's very obvious. You can see it there. You can see a lot of these little strips. And this is all fertilizer burn. Another reason why it's even more obvious to me that this is fertilizer burn along this section here, it's just little strips, little lines, little thin lines. And the reason this probably happened is because they probably went around and then they kind of stopped right here and then they basically didn't disengage the fertilizer, and that basically plumped a whole bunch on the ground. And another reason why I can tell is they kind of slowed down here because they were wondering, hey, what am I going to do with the gate? And then right here they didn't disengage it again, and they tried to open this, and again they didn't disengage the fertilizer, and it all just basically went on the ground. A little update on my lovely perennial grass. You can see all the green grass coming up, and that will eventually hide all this brown grass from the past. You can see it's even taller on this side. This one grows better than the other one. I'm not sure why, but that's much taller already. So that's what it'll start looking like. Pretty soon it'll be full. So that's about it, everybody. So I hope these steps will help you to get a better lawn, and better yet, they are all free. So if you guys have any other questions or comments, shoot me some in the comments below.